All right, we're ready to begin. This is Accuracy in America with Don Irvine. My special guest today is an old friend of mine, Bill Gertz, longtime journalist, author, raconteur, maybe, somewhere along the line. Good to have you join me today, Bill.
Good to be on the show, Don.
Well, you know what, besides the fact that I've known you for what seems forever, you've become quite the expert on China over the years. And you've just published, I guess it's just an ebook format currently, right? This How China's Communist Party Made the World Sick. And
Yes, this is the book, and it's also it's a booklet. It's kind of a small booklet.
okay, and so that definitely intrigued me because not only has we're still kind of in the thick of this thing, but you got this thing out awfully quick, which I think is great. But explain to me a little bit about the behind the book. I mean, what brought you to this and things like that.
Yes, in I guess it was late April, my book publisher, Encounter Books, Roger Kimball, approached me. I had recently published in September a book on China called Deceiving the Sky: Inside Communist China's Drive for Global Supremacy. And that came out before the pandemic outbreak. And I'd been covering extensively the Chinese mishandling of the virus outbreak in China. And in fact, on January 26th, I was the first to report in the Washington Times that the virus may have escaped from a laboratory. Drew an immediate attack from the Chinese government, as well as a lot of liberal politicians and media outlets here. That story's holding up pretty well. I also reported that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was linked to China's covert biological weapons program. We haven't had the information on that. But the book is really a close look at how China mishandled the outbreak and really caused devastating damage to the world economy and killed tens of thousands of people. It could have been avoided. It could have been averted if China had taken the proper steps early on in the outbreak. But instead, as most communist governments do, they lied and deceived their own people. And the result was this horrible pandemic that we're now dealing with.
So, in your research, how far back do you think it goes? I mean, when do you think they knew about this?
Again, the Chinese have been totally overly secretive and misleading and deceptive about it. I trace officially the origin of the outbreak is traced to December 1st in Wuhan, when a elderly gentleman showed up at the Wuhan Central Hospital with these various pneumonia-like symptoms that were the doctors there recognized as similar to the SARS, the severe acute respiratory syndrome that originated in China back in 2003. And this, they thought that they were seeing another outbreak of SARS. They moved to have it genome mapped, and it turns out that this was a completely new virus. Again, the doctors, it's very interesting that China has near totalitarian control on its information, but a few doctors in Wuhan, or the real heroes, were able to alert their coworkers, were able to send a message saying, look, we've got people showing up with a new type of pneumonia, protect your workers, wear protective gear, it looks like it's spreading from person to person. They were repressed mercilessly. They were attacked. One of the main doctors, a Dr. Liu, was actually one of the big heroes, and he eventually died of the coronavirus. And he was immediately recognized throughout China as someone who stood up to the Communist Party and said, look, they're trying to hide this dangerous disease, and we need to take steps to prevent it from spreading.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the quote, official numbers out of China for infections and deaths and things like that. I think the White House, there'd been some investigation, and there were reports that maybe the death toll could be maybe 50 times higher, the infection rate could be 50 times as high. I mean, do you have any feel for that? I mean, I am like you. I mean, I think we're kind of cut from the same cloth in the sense of neither one of us trust the Chinese government. We know them too well. Do you have an idea of where we are? I mean, how much underreporting is going on over there?
Um, yeah, it's the experts and the U.S. intelligence community has looked at this. They say it's orders of magnitude higher, as you mentioned, 50 times higher. They claim they only had, a very small number of infections and deaths, but it could be in the hundreds of thousands because they basically covered it up. This has really been a wake-up call for the world to understand the nature of this communist regime. In my research and writing books and studying this issue, one thing that has really struck me is that Americans are completely uneducated about the communist system in China. They were familiar with the Cold War, but they have not, and the Soviet Union, but they have not fully understood that this is a new type of communism. And we've so integrated our economy for 40 years. My argument has been we had a 40-year gamble that if we just traded with China, if we ignored their human rights abuses, if we ignored their arms proliferation around the world, that this would create a moderate non-communist state. And it's been an utter failure. We've got instead a communist system under Xi Jinping, which is now expanding. In the past, it had been bide our time, build our capabilities. Well, now they're on the march, and they have something called the China Dream, which is really a China nightmare. And they want the entire world to come under Chinese control.
Yeah, I mean, I get that point. I mean, I think that's really good. The thing that really bothers me or gets me is just that, we're not the media. When President Trump or conservatives come out and they talk about the Wuhan virus or the China virus or whatever they want to call it, they get immediate backlashes. Oh, you're being racist and all of this thing. But as the late Dr. Fred Schwartz says, you can trust the communists to be communists, right? And so what I think about too is just that this is a wake up call, but I'm not sure how many Americans are really waking up. Do they really understand? What are we going to have to do to really make them understand of what the Chinese government has done to us?
Yeah, it's a big problem. I have contacts within the Trump administration, and one of the things I've been urging them to do is that the Trump administration needs to create a book-length white paper document on the Communist Party of China, because China has been in control of the information narrative. They have an extremely sophisticated disinformation and influence operation. They use a department called the United Front Work Department. And I think that a really good assessment of the Communist Party of China, its crimes and misdemeanors, its operating procedures would be the good starting point for new policies in dealing with China. And I think, we're seeing it piecemeal on the part of the president. He's mostly interested in the trade and economic aspects of China's misbehaviors. Secretary of State Pompeo has been leading the charge on the information front and the diplomatic front. The Justice Department has been doing an incredible job of going after Chinese intelligence operatives in the United States of an array of different activities, whether it's stealing secrets or high technology, whether it's buying off our university professors in a bid to gain valuable expertise that can be used for China's military and civilian modernization program. But there's no top-down strategic effort to really take a look and say, look, we've got to change the system over there. It can't be business as usual. The 40-year gamble is a real disaster for the United States and the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, there have been some obvious. You mentioned trade as part of one of the discussions at the president. I mean, that was a big, headline issue for a long time. The kind of the trade war we were having with China, that seems to have gone to the back burner because we're dealing with obviously this terrible pandemic. What do you see that what's going to happen with our trade relations? When we eventually start kind of getting back to some kind of normalcy, in this world. And do you see, what happens to travel between the U.S. and China, or Chinese officials, or just Chinese tourists, anybody, students?
Yeah. I'd like to answer that question by going into some of the recommendations in my new booklet on how China's Communist Party made the world sick. I think the first thing that we need to do is the United States government needs to launch a full investigation of how the pandemic started. We need to find out that the doctors that I've talked to who tell me that unless you really get samples and can trace the details of the genome of the original virus, you're not going to be able to stop it. So we need to really get to the bottom of what took place in China and how they covered it up. That's a starting point. The second thing we need to do is we need to make sure that our supply chains are protected. We can remember, I think it was in March or April, the Chinese government threatened to cut off pharmaceutical supplies to the United States and threatened to throw us into a sea of coronavirus. We can't have our supply chains dependent on China because of this. It shows that. Next, we've got to stop training Chinese technical and managerial people. The people who run the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the Wuhan Centers for Disease Control were trained in the United States and Europe. And we see that they have not protected those laboratories from mishaps or leaks and mishandling of deadly pathogens. So I think that's important. And then last, international organizations. The Chinese government completely corrupted the World Health Organization, which has one mission, which is to deal with pandemics like we have. Instead, it's become an organization that followed China's lead. It lied to the world early on about both travel from China, including millions of people who included people who were infected and then spread the virus to Europe and then to the United States. So we've got to take a look at these international organizations and say either China doesn't control them or the United States will leave those organizations and create new organizations run by democratic, open, free systems that aren't corrupted by Chinese influence.
Well, you said that the Trump administration. I mean, they've done some things. So some of the parts of the administration have done probably better than other work on this. I mean, do you think? I mean, if President Trump gets reelected, that he's still going to need, that they would need to say flip the House, maintain the Senate to be able to put some of your suggestions into action, or can if he doesn't have the House still, can he still kind of go this alone with just the Senate? I mean, what kind of things does he need? Does he need anything legislatively? Really, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think the administration's on track to do a lot of these things already. The president has announced that he's going to cut off funding for the World Health Organization. I think the next step needs to be, well, how can we fix it? How can we fix the World Health? And if we can't fix it, can we create something new? Let Bill Gates create a new an American style or free world style World Health Organization. Politically, I think there's a growing consensus that the China threat is real and existential to the United States. That is another positive sign. Now there are vast differences between Democrats and Republicans on how to deal with China, but I think there's no question that this mishandling of the pandemic by Beijing is really bringing about tremendous anger from both sides of the political aisle as well as the rest of the world. And I think that that's an opportunity to really initiate some new policies and really put pressure on China to democratize. The whole point of the World Trade Organization, another international organization, the Clinton administration made a strategic error in admitting China to the World Trade Organization. This again was to be a first step in their reforming into becoming a more market economy, a more free and open system, and that's been an utter failure as well. So a lot of reevaluations are needed on both, and I think that it would be a one way to develop a bipartisan consensus for some new policies on China.
So I noticed yesterday on Facebook you said you made a trip to Fort Detrick. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
No, I didn't go to Fort Detrick. I was in Alexandria, and I met with a group of
Okay.
retired Army doctors two of whom worked at Fort Detrick. And it was very interesting. They basically said, I gave them a briefing on China's handling of the coronavirus. But in the course of discussing with them, they were saying that I asked them, I said, what are the three things? How are we going to get out of this situation that we're in? And the three things that we need to do are herd immunity, therapies and treatments, and then vaccines. And they said, we need to do all three, but unfortunately, we're only doing two. We're doing therapies and vaccines, and we haven't done anything on the herd immunity side. And there's a real reluctance to do that. And I think it's, my own view is that I think this is part of the radical equality that the liberals have promoted for so much, that everyone should sacrifice for the few rather than the few sacrificing for everyone. And our economy is right now on its knees as a result of the lockdown procedures that have been taken by the states and the federal government. And the whole notion there is that we can't lose one single life. Unfortunately, this disease, we have to care about taking care of people, but we've gotten it backwards. And I think the doctors agreed with me as well that we didn't shut down our economy when we had earlier outbreaks of disease. What we need to do is to be able to have a more balanced approach to protecting those that are vulnerable, older people, those with pre-existing conditions, and then allow the rest of the people to go to work. And hopefully this will create a more of a herd immunity. Again, most of the people that contract the coronavirus disease don't die from it. They have minor symptoms. It's those older people and those with other conditions that are really facing problems. So the doctors were very saying that the data and the models that were being used by the people running the country now from a healthcare perspective have been wrong. The models have been wrong. The estimates have been wrong. I'm myself very concerned about the idea that we're giving up our civil liberties. It's a slippery slope to do that. Now we're saying that we're doing this in an emergency situation for public health, but we shouldn't. Our system was founded on the idea of limited government and individual responsibility, and the liberal left in the United States has tried to diminish that. They want the government to become the nanny state. We've seen the rise of socialists like Bernie Sanders and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who are pushing a socialist agenda where the government is in control of everything. And you and I understand very well, having fought the battle against communists and leftists for many years, that that's not what this country was built on.
Yeah, I mean, what's going on there, I mean, we just saw what Nancy Pelosi has put together, what, a $3 trillion, another package for which, there was no Republican input. I mean, this is just getting to be outrageous in terms of what's happening, what we're seeing in our country. I mean, plus the fact that I kind of feel like every day is Groundhog Day for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's really time to, I think we've got to go for that third leg of the virus thing, which is the herd immunity. They've got to figure out ways, getting people out there, dealing with these issues and finding solutions that can get the country moving again. This has been the biggest, most self-inflicted wound on our economy that we've ever experienced now. And, I've seen it progress. First, we had to flatten the curve. We flattened the curve. Now, rather than loosen up, there's an unwillingness that people are saying, oh, well, we have to prevent the rebound of the disease. And, we just gotta get going again.
All right. Well, that's great. I really appreciate you joining me. I think that was extremely informative. It's always good to talk with you. We don't see each other enough.
Yeah, it's good seeing you too.
Maybe I can call you back later on as we get a little bit further down the road and see what actually happened here after we get back to work in our somewhat normal fashion.
Sure. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bill. We'll see you.
Thank you.